you so much, Kelly. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. There we go. Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone who is here live today. And to those of you who are watching this after the fact, welcome to you as well. And thank you for finding your way here to our webinar. And I hope you find it useful. So where are we now? Well, we're still in COVID, however much we do not want to be at this point. And we're in a period of slowly reopening, and I am thinking of it as lurching. We are lurching open, and there will continue to be some kind of bumps along the way. We are transitioning as well over time to a new normal, to a different normal, I anticipate, than pre-COVID. And the new variants of COVID create uncertainty as we move toward this. Nevertheless, I think we're all hoping for a great year ahead. And even if it doesn't look like a pre-COVID year in our local food and direct marketing space, I think a lot of last year's learning can be applied this year. And I think we're looking forward to that and having a little bit more understanding of what customers are looking for. So I'm going to first kind of highlight some key trends that we've seen. Key trends that have occurred during COVID-19. There have been a number of changes in how much people buy, changes in what people buy, changes in where people shop, and changes in how people shop. And so I'm going to highlight some of the kind of key changes that have occurred. So first of all, this is a little dated at this point. This goes back to June of last year, but this is a nice graph from the USDA Economic Research Service. And we see that total food spending is down. And this has to do with a couple of things. We see that food away from home spending has gone down. So this is food out in restaurants. This continues to be lower than it was pre-COVID. And of course, income shocks and unemployment have made have also kind of depressed our food spending somewhat among consumers. If you want to access these slides later, they'll be available. I also want to point out, and there are hyperlinks to all of these resources from the source category here. So I hope you'll take a look at any of these that you find interesting or want to dig into. So here again, we see year-to-year change in monthly food at home and food away from home expenditures. So you see in early 2020, we had this large dip downward. The orange going down is the food away from home, the significant decrease of 50% change in food away from home. And we see a spike at food at home as offsetting that food away from home change in part. We also saw that consumer prices for food at home were up about 5%. This kind of varies by category, but in general, this is something we would expect to see, and in economics, we would expect to see that as demand increases for food at home, so these are things that you buy at the grocery store, that the price levels will increase, and so we are seeing that. Now, I want to talk about some key kind of big trends that we saw occurring in the last year, and then we'll talk about kind of the outlook and how some of these will factor into the outlook moving forward. So one is online shopping has been increasing. And so here's a visual from McKinsey & Company, and this is consumers purchasing, and it's by category online. We have groceries at the very top. And you see that this is international. The US is in the furthest left column, but the blue basically indicates substantial positive growth in online shopping across all categories and across all countries. So that's the kind of headline story there. In addition, we see that there's a lot of new behaviors happening. So along with online shopping, right, we can and will talk about in this session additional kind of responses that folks have had in terms of their shopping patterns. And so we see that around the world, there has been this change in how people are shopping, and many people around the world intend to continue some of those changes. So as we're thinking about what does the new normal look like, what's ahead, we need to think about not only what happened during COVID-19, but what's the intent to continue, and can we get a read on that? So it seems like intent to continue is high. My thought about this is that COVID-19 precipitated some changes that consumers were maybe reluctant to make previously, for example, to online purchasing. Anecdotally, for my own household, I just hadn't gotten around to figuring out the apps for some of the online shopping, and COVID precipitated that for me. And now that my entire shopping list is in an app, or much of it is, right, that really changes the additional, what we call the marginal cost of each shopping trip. That marginal cost is quite low in terms of just the transaction cost, what I have to deal with on the app, because my entire kind of purchase history is already in there. So some of those initial costs were high, but they remain very low going forward. Here is some work from Dawn Thilmany at Colorado State and colleagues. They're looking at changes in online food shopping amid the pandemic. And so what's nice about this is they actually are able to pull out local and regional foods e-commerce. I think this is from Brick Meets Click. So we see sales were up very considerable amounts, 450%, 360%. The number of orders increased and the basket size increased. So always we want to be considering both how many people are shopping and also their basket size. And we saw increases in both. Also, this is an interesting study that recently came out that looks at online shopping frequency by age group in the US. And this is a nationally representative study of 5,000 US consumers. And so not surprisingly, we see that online shopping is more prevalent among our younger age groups. So we see the kind of orange brown is September 2019. So this is pre-pandemic, and then we see early in the pandemic and then later in the fall in September 20. But we do see even among our age 65 plus consumers, we see that there has been adoption of online shopping. Also, just to kind of think about this by market channel, if we consider the percentage of kind of folks that are up in each channel that are buying online, we see that online shopping frequency is most prevalent in the food box and meal kit space. This is unsurprising because these, like the Blue Apron, HelloFresh type boxes, right? These are being basically online based programs. We also see though that 50% of purchases, almost 50% of purchases is in September 2020 that were from farmers markets or direct from producers were done online among folks in the study. And we see the kind of lowest adoption of the online shopping was in the grocery space. So kind of a traditional super center and supermarket grocery space. But we still see that there was definitely an uptick in that, a substantial uptick between September 2019 and September 2020, showing how that online adoption has increased across all of these different kind of market channels. And then also to look to restaurants, we see that online has also increased for restaurant channels, both large national chains and the local independent restaurants. In addition, a new study by Lawrence Neredes at Arizona State and co-authors looks at specifically online grocery purchases in the Phoenix and Detroit market. And what I like about this is that they actually are showing the kind of breakdown of delivery, pickup, and both, and where people are kind of sourcing that. So we see Instacart is substantial for pickup directly from the grocery store, unsurprisingly, is kind of a substantial source of that. But we do see that CSA and farm kind of pickups, which are the gray stripes at the top, are not insubstantial. This was from the same study that was done in March through May 2020. I thought this was a really nice graph, right? We want to know not only that people are purchasing online and to the extent to which that's occurring and the extent to which they might continue, but also why. Why did they start in the first place? Fear of COVID and feeling unsafe are the highest the most common kind of categories here, but we also see things having to do with access, right, due to time constraints and due to lack of transportation, due to childcare, et cetera. So those are things that besides the kind of immediate kind of personal safety and COVID risk, the other categories, right, might be things that we want to be considering in the local foods and direct marketing space that are going to continue to shape customer experience and customer needs moving forward. Okay, we also saw an increased interest in local. This is from a study by Claudia Schmidt and co-authors at Pennsylvania State University, and they showed how Google Trends kind of searches can be used to kind of look at consumer sentiment at various times. So they're actually looking at early March 2020, and they show that there was a large uptick in not only searches for grocery stores, right? Looking at grocery stores online for those who are used to going to grocery stores in person and not looking at their websites. But we also saw increased searches for food banks. At that early point in the pandemic, we didn't really see much of an uptick in searches for farmers markets. When we do kind of look more into the local food space, we see that there was a large increase in interest in CSAs, so community supported agriculture, food boxes that people are able to purchase a share with a farm and then get a regular box for delivery or pickup. We saw there was an increase in interest in local food during this time as well from these Google Trends searches. Don Thomany and Haley Hedmanson at Colorado State have done some really nice fact sheets. I'll provide a link at the end. Again, this is from that consumer survey of 5,000 US consumers. Okay, so this is talking about new outlets. So 35% of consumers that they surveyed tried at least one new outlet in the marketing channels below. So you see that there was some exploration of new markets during this period in the pandemic, which is great for us to see that there may be new people who are seeing, finding local foods or engaging with direct markets for the first time. Again, persistence is always going to be the question. Can that demand be sustained? We do see that about a third of folks who were new shoppers in early April were still purchasing from these various channels in September, right? So we're looking at farmers markets, CSAs, food boxes, artisan markets, and local and independent restaurants. So this suggests that that some of that demand can be sustained moving forward, but we should probably temper our expectations and consider that 100% of the new shoppers that we saw in 2020 are unlikely to continue moving forward. It's going to be some share of that group. In addition, this is also from Thomany and Edmondson showing the percentage of consumers purchasing from each source. Again, moving through the pandemic. So we do see that although there are many people who tried out new sources, what I think is interesting here is that farmers market purchases in their data, in their sample, this 5,000 consumers did decline relative to September 2019, so pre-pandemic. But we do see some kind of interest in independent local restaurants, right? As we move through the year last year, we see some interest in artisan markets, and so some changes there. One of the other things that is interesting to note, and probably folks have experienced themselves, is an interest, kind of notice of these different trends in folks' demand for fresh and preserved foods and kind of differences. Different people reacted in different ways in terms of how they changed their preferences for the types of food they were getting. We do see, and I don't think I have a graph on this, we do see that shopping frequency decreased during the pandemic. I think we'll see this kind of increase back to a little bit more frequent levels moving forward. But we saw a lot of different reactions. Some people really wanted to were thinking of moving to fresh food. Some people really focused on shelf-stable things, canned food. Others were thinking about frozen food, right? How can I reduce waste and ensure that, produce that I purchase is still good in 2 weeks? These were the kinds of questions that consumers were asking themselves, right? We also see an uptick in dried food and other shelf-stable kind of form of preservation. So this is something that we saw. So this is, again, from the Google Trends data. Nevertheless, most consumers report eating about the same. This is dietary changes in Phoenix and Detroit from the Chinerides et al. Study in March through May 2020. So we see that there's quite a bit of variation. While most people were staying about kind of the same in terms of their diet, or they claim to be, some were eating less, some were eating more or less healthy. It really depended on the situation, right? And I'm sure that there are connections here, and they go into some more detailed analysis in the paper, right, with income levels, demographic characteristics, whether people could work from home, et cetera. And the strength of the interest varies by state. I thought this was really interesting, particularly because you can kind of pick out Ohio here. So Ohio was most interested in frozen food. Folks in Ohio, we see all around us that fresh food really dominated, except for West Virginia with canned food. So these are just intensity of kind of search interest. It does not mean that Ohioans are not interested in fresh food, but this was just the kind of most common search term in this space. So this is kind of interesting and kind of creates a question of why is it that Ohioans maybe weren't searching for fresh food at the same level. And it also kind of raises a question of what are the opportunities to provide people with frozen food if that's really what they're interested in. And I do have something about frequency of fresh food shopping. So this is Deloitte Fresh Food Consumer Surveys from 2019 and 2020. And so we saw that the purchases of fresh food became less frequent during the pandemic, according to this Deloitte Insights consumer survey. Also, I think this is really important to consider. We've had a lot of concerns over the last year about stockouts. So concerns that certain foods might not be available at the grocery store or at a particular outlet when consumers want them, and concerns that sparks for consumers about shortages. When consumers experience a stockout, these are some of the things that they might do. Many will replace the item with an alternative fresh food. Some will replace the item with frozen or processed foods, and some will wait until the next time they shop. Very few, interestingly, reported in this study going to another store. So that's good in the sense that it means if you run out of something, folks are unlikely to change stores because of that. But I think this is helpful in recognizing if you are in this situation as a producer or as a market, what do folks do next? Okay, and the fourth trend I want to talk about is consumer focus on value. We are seeing, this is a McKinsey and Company study that shows consumers are focusing more on price during COVID. So there has been more mindfulness around money, changing to less expensive products to save money, and some researching products before buying. This is unsurprising, again, because folks have taken income hits. There's higher levels of unemployment, right? And so we would expect that folks would be more money conscious. This, of course, has implications for pricing and purchasing patterns for producers and direct markets. This is also, I think, a really useful graphic also from McKinsey. And this is showing the top 3 reasons for choosing a new place to shop. And so we see that this is, that value is really the key thing across countries. This is common everywhere. Convenience is also incredibly important. So these online shopping kind of options, consumer-focused options, consumer-driven innovations, I think are really leading to that convenience, helping stores to address that convenience aspect. And availability, of course, is another key thing. Now that's new places to shop. If we then look to brand, we see again in the US, value, availability, and convenience continue to be primary. We see a little bit more variability here across countries, which I find interesting. Quality is a more important factor in some countries, and health and hygiene and purpose-driven are other factors that show up outside of the US in terms of the top 3 reasons for choosing a new brand. And we might not think of brands in the local food direct marketing space, but I'm going to argue as we move forward today that branding is going to be particularly important for folks and building your farm brand and your story and your narrative. Okay, the last trend, grocery is still king. So we see still that grocery, despite interest in local foods, despite interest in new various ways of shopping, primarily most folks are still getting their foods through grocery stores, super centers, or supermarkets. And so we see that this has only increased this kind of use of super centers and supermarkets during the pandemic. So just to kind of highlight a few things, many people still prefer shopping in person. One area that both in grocery, but also in other spaces that folks can differentiate themselves, that is noted in a recent study that I found, is through the time window. So being able to provide folks with what they have ordered or requested sooner is going to be better, and folks will value that. One note I also wanted to make that's been a challenge in this space, in the food security space, is that is with the increase in food insecurity, with the levels of unemployment, with the negative income shocks we've been seeing for many folks, we have seen increased enrollment in SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, which is the program, the federal program that is intended to be a social safety net for people in the food kind of space. So SNAP is still not accepted online by many retailers, and the Food and Nutrition Service, or FNS, has been doing a pilot program. So all the Amazon and Walmart are accepting SNAP, but this pilot program is still in the works. So one thing to kind of be thinking about, whether wherever you're kind of you are in the marketing channel space, is how are you able to reach these food insecure customers? Is this part of your customer base or not? Do you want it to be? And what are kind of the pros and cons of that? So this kind of paying attention to what's happening with SNAP, I think, is a key piece there. Okay, so ultimately, I wanted to talk about innovations and trends in local and direct marketing. And I think the previous kind of bit that I shared was key context for that, which is why I spent so long on it. But now I want to move on. So with farmers markets, we did see, I'm kind of going to talk through some of the trends that we've seen. And unfortunately, we don't have great Ohio specific data on this. I can share some anecdotes, but I'm going to try to distill some key trends and observations that I've read from some national folks and Ohio, also heard from some Ohio folks. So we are seeing some new consumers attracted to these products or to these markets, which is exciting. However, markets are really seeing challenges. The National Farmers Market Coalition reported that most markets saw increased costs this last year and declines in income, right? They were having to space to do additional kind of things to of workers and consumers and food hygiene and et cetera. So in addition, markets have been faced with highly variable policy and regulatory environments that have presented a lot of challenges. We have seen that some markets in Ohio, for example, closed because for the entire season, because the folks running the market didn't want to take the risk of being open, whereas others had to kind of shift with the changing regulatory requirements of the county or the state or local health officials. Many markets did shift to online marketplaces where possible. And so we have seen definitely an increase in this. And we also, though, saw that some farmers were forced to shift other channel sales, for example, retail and institutions to farmers markets. So we saw that some folks who were selling to restaurants, who were selling to schools, right, were having to shift those sales to farmers markets or other direct channels. So that also may have created some increased competition in this space as folks were trying to find an outlet for their product and weren't able to use their normal channels. So what did we see for CSAs? Well, CSAs, community supported agriculture, right? These already had kind of I would say a great model set up to kind of shift to online because they already kind of had a pickup model. While some CSAs, have had a volunteer or labor requirement, many have already had a relatively low contact model with an online option. So consumers had changing needs though during this time. So really we're seeing that there's been a strong need for very good communication, easy online ordering systems. Farms have seen an increase in costs, demand for business, and interestingly, a demand for their business, so a demand for their product by higher income consumers has actually left some with less ability to engage in food security work that they found was important to them as purpose-driven businesses. So I think that's an interesting issue. And we've seen that some folks have just had a hard time pivoting online in the same way. This might be true for small and medium farms, just due to cost reasons. This is also true, of course, and we see this across Ohio due to lack of broadband access. One innovation that I've recently heard about that I wanted to mention that I think is interesting in this space. I'm not aware of this happening in Ohio, but it's happened in other places, including in Kentucky in the last year, is virtual CSA fairs. So using online tools like Facebook Live and a Zoom call with breakout rooms to actually match farmers to consumers. So give farmers an opportunity, low cost opportunity, if they have the broadband access or the good internet access, to be able to share about their operation, to share about their CSAs, and giving them exposure to new customers. And so these have been, I think, a neat innovation in this space and are helping make that connection, because often just the connecting consumers to producers, as we know, is one of the key challenges in this direct marketing space. Food hubs, we've seen that they've had a changing role during the pandemic. Some moved to the CSA model, and in general, they had an opportunity to be really innovative during this time and leverage their strengths as aggregators in new ways, to begin aggregating from farms that may have been going directly to consumers before. They were able to kind of move into the food security space to help and to kind of leverage their strengths as aggregators to get food to those in need. So we did see some kind of innovative models happening there. In general, I think the role of food hubs as aggregators was probably kind of a key strength during this time, because they could pivot everything that was coming into their kind of aggregation hub to those new channels. Now, one thing I want to mention here is market entry. We did see that we had a lot of shifts in who was selling to what channels in this last year. And so the entry of new farms due to COVID-19, I'm not talking about new people farming, but rather people who are already farming changing to new marketing channels because their channels have been affected. This, I think, it has a couple of different implications that we should be aware of moving forward. One is it can cause problems for existing farmers. It can cause more competition, right? I think in general, the local foods and direct marketing space, I would say, appears to me to be a very collaborative space, but at the end of the day, people need to pay their bills, right? And so this can create more competition in the channels that are most active, like the direct to consumer channel. But it also can, and this is an observation that I've heard, can kind of affect how the farms in this space are viewed, right? If somebody moves into the direct to consumer channel, hasn't been in it before, is doing is in that space for the first time and is not providing a great customer experience or not giving the direct to consumer kind of channel a very good name, maybe unintentionally, right? But just because of being new to that area, that can affect other farms in that space, right? People might try out this one farm and say, oh, direct to consumer is not for me. There's not enough good enough consumer experience. I can't get what I want, etc. So this is where it's really key to have your brand, have your story. Individual farm marketing, I think, can be helpful here to ensure that that you're telling your story, that you are clearly communicating the quality and the value that you bring from your operation, and that you're providing a great customer experience as well to go along with that. Okay, so shift to online. I already talked about this a lot. This is really common this year. One thing I want to mention with this that I think we really need to consider as we go forward and folks think about the reopening and the transition to the new normal is who has been left out of this shift online. We know that older folks in our communities might be less likely to be shopping online. We need to consider who's not shopping online and how can we reach them? Is there a segment of the market that is missing, and how do we reach them in a way that works for our business? So that's something that I think is important to consider there. And again, food insecure individuals are another thing. Are they part of your market? Do you live in a community that's relatively food insecure? Were they part of your market pre-COVID? And what did they need in terms of access moving forward? Now, virtual farmers markets are one option. Brian Razzana here at Ohio State has some work looking at a virtual farmers market model here in Ohio. Now, one thing that they encountered, and this was a planned kind of virtual market opening pre-COVID, was challenges with public health regulations and, for example, shared storage. So new models, one of the challenges with innovating is that the models might actually be ahead of where the regulators are. So the key regulators here, right, might be, for example, public health folks at the county and state level. So the key here is to kind of really be in touch with who your regulators are, know who you are, know who regulates the space you're in, and ensure that you're communicating with them about new models. I think doing this ahead of time as you innovate will help to ensure that there aren't disruptions in your model later on. One other neat kind of thing that I wanted to share is about urban agriculture. And so we've seen a lot of kind of discussion this year of gardening, of community gardening, and these are things that we don't tend to measure very well in our data because they're often, especially home gardening, right? It's taking place in people's homes. It's difficult to observe at a firm level. So there was this study this year by Lawrence Nerdis and co-authors that looked at urban agriculture prior to and during the pandemic in Detroit and Phoenix, again, two metropolitan areas. And counter to what we've been hearing in some of the kind of popular press about this, it did appear to them that there had been a decline in community gardening and growing food at home during the pandemic. Now, my thought is that this likely has to do with time constraints that folks are facing. So we may have seen an uptick in gardening and home production in some income groups in some areas where there's high access to land, but we've seen that has declined in some of our urban areas. So we should be cautious as we make kind of generalizations about that. Okay, so let's talk about outlook here. So as we move into the spring and summer, I think there's gonna be staggered reopening, right? I talked about that lurching at the very beginning, which I think is a good way to describe this. We will see a return to higher food away from home purchasing. I'm pretty confident about this, and that we will see some restaurant sales increase. Certainly there have been closures of restaurants, and the restaurant kind of setting has really changed. So I think this will be affecting folks who've been producing for restaurants. But I do think in general, we'll see this, we'll see this kind of increase moving forward, especially in the summer. There'll be continued high unemployment and consumer policy uncertainty. So this is something that I have been saying since last year, right? There's going to be the sustained consumer focus on value and convenience, the things that I already mentioned. And really, we've seen a global increase in extreme poverty and food insecurity that is affecting all of our world markets that will it's going to take us some time to recover from. What's next in 2021 and beyond? Like I said, slow recovery of food away from home spending. I think we're going to see a slow recovery of institutional food demand. I would expect to see better recovery in fall 2021. I think there's a strong interest across the state of Ohio to be doing some reopening. I have no private information about this. I am not in communication with the governor or the president of our university or anyone who is kind of talking about this more deeply, but that would be my expectation. I think we'll see some return to pre-COVID patterns as we move forward. So moving back toward non-price food values, non-convenience food values for consumers. And really a return of interest in outdoor markets and agritourism venues, which is a great for our multifunctional agriculture folks. That said, I think we need to maintain caution moving forward. And then some new patterns will be sustained. I do think we will see a continued consumer interest in online sales, and it would behoove folks to be on board with that and to be thinking about what that's going to look like for them moving forward in the long term. Okay. Opportunities, again, outdoor and on-farm activities. I think with vaccination increasing, my prediction here, and I'm not giving blanket permission here, of course, for folks, outdoor and on-farm activities, I think we'll be able to move forward this year. But I think one of the things that's going to be a real challenge is that there's differing views among our communities about whether COVID is over or not. And so the caveat here is that I think, we have scientific evidence that COVID-19 is not over. And so heightened precautions are still going to be needed in these venues. And so that will continue to be a challenge this year. Hopefully learning from last year will make this year a little bit easier on this front. But I think that cautiously planning for reopening in this space is warranted and will be a good opportunity. And I know a welcome opportunity for many folks who are excited to get outside this year. Online sales, consumers are more comfortable with it. It will continue. Do consider the comfort of the consumers you serve with shopping online. If you are, if a lot of your market is a high income retired population, but they're relatively uncomfortable with shopping online, you may think about, how can I continue to serve those consumers? And also consider the broadband availability in your community. I think a great way to figure this out is to talk to your community, right? Do some market research this year of your own. Consider who your key consumers are and talk to them and ask them about their experience. And consider your own experience as a member of that community. As local and direct marketers, I think we always have the asset of being in the community ourselves and having a really good read on what's happening. The importance of brand and price will continue to be important. I've highlighted a couple of interesting studies here. So one is actually from the psychology literature. So time-constrained people don't have time to think through their decisions as thoughtfully. So we use heuristics. We use these simple rules, and folks are going to continue to use those as they continue to deal with the stress and the time constraints of COVID. So make purchasing experience easy for consumers. That's key in this time. Also, we see that putting people before profit as a key strategy is going to be successful, and I think that is something key that we have to consider. Ensuring all necessary information is provided online is going to be important. As we've seen some rapid shifts online, sometimes the information that we're used to seeing included, as this study pointed out, the mandatory nutritional facts information for some foods, right, has not actually been provided online. I've seen websites personally where I go online and there's information about quantities, but there's not information about prices, for example. So providing as much information as possible in a simple way will make consumers more likely to kind of stay with that channel. Okay, again, putting consumers first. This is a graph from McKinsey, and it's actually looking at the 2008 recession, right? But this is kind of driving home what I just said. Focusing on the consumer experience or the customer experience is a winning strategy in a recession. We see that the leaders recovered, were more resilient and recovered more quickly when they focused on consumer experience relative to laggards in this space. So this, again, is going to be key. Another thing I want to mention is the opportunity to contribute to food security. As members of these communities, we're for folks who are also selling foods, I think there's a lot of interest among our local and direct marketers to contribute to food security. Now, certainly we don't want that to be doing that so much that our own direct marketers are affected and can't put food on their own tables, right? But I want to kind of highlight some of the opportunities here. So obviously it's tragic that our communities are experiencing heightened food insecurity due to the pandemic. Unemployment and income impacts, right, have led to this decreased food security. We've seen rapid shifts that have caused challenges to taking SNAP dollars for some food shopping venues. Some folks in the direct marketing space, right, have maybe lower income folks who are underrepresented minorities have noted challenges in getting culturally appropriate foods and challenges in accessing market locations for some of our direct marketing settings. So these are a couple of things that we might want to be considering in the direct marketing space is how can we provide better access to these consumers? How can we accept SNAP dollars? There have been a lot of waivers for SNAP and child nutrition, et cetera. So the link I provide here actually shows the different USDA waivers around kind of rules related to SNAP and child nutrition programs. So I think this is a space where innovation is needed and warranted, and there's opportunities to think about, how can we continue to serve our communities in innovative ways during this time, again, putting people first. Okay, some challenges. Uncertain demand. There will continue to be uncertain demand during this time. So some ways to mitigate risk from this uncertain demand. We already know that for our direct marketers and local food producers that diversity in marketing channels is one of the ways that folks mitigate risk. So this will continue, I think, to be key this year and to be thinking very expansively about this. Formalizing contracts is another thing. To the extent that you do contract with institutional buyers, with restaurants, et cetera, to the extent that producers can formalize contracts, this will create more certainty. Some of these markets, we know that they operate on these kind of informal handshake markets. We want to be able to have that level of trust. However, formalized contracts can provide security when we're not sure that those kind of informal agreements are going to be enough. And engage with your customers, be flexible to their needs and listen to their needs. I think that's going to be really key this year. Again, uncertainty about COVID, this is going to continue to impact our supply chains, and I think we have to be ready for it. So it's not over. Most people in Ohio are not yet vaccinated, and new variants could lead to new outbreaks. Let's hope not, but we should be cautious as we think about reopening for these reasons. And changing requirements. State and federal requirements and recommendations will evolve. And so again, know who regulates your industry and keep in contact with them. Know who your local contacts are. Reach out to your local county officials, to your local county extension folks, right, to understand those changing requirements. And worker safety. Key, the kind of whole, I haven't really mentioned workers. We have a lot of small operations that operate in our direct marketing and local food space, and worker safety is an issue in every aspect of our economy right now. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? That's the idiom. So take precautions. At a minimum, follow state and federal recommendations. One of the things that we're seeing that workers really value and are kind of needed right now. I see this as a teacher, right, with my students. Be compassionate, recognize employees' caregiving expectations and financial situation, et cetera. Now, key here is having plans. One of the things we talk about often with our small kind of enterprises is, have a plan about food safety, have a business plan. I think one of the things that can really help folks here is having a plan. What if you get sick? What if your employees get sick? Make a plan ahead of time about what you will do, especially when we have enterprises or operations that rely on one key person or manager. It's really important to think through this ahead of time before you're in a challenging situation. And also I would consider maybe hiring remote workers for some roles. These could even be folks in your community who are just across town, right? Doesn't mean you're hiring labor from somewhere else necessarily, but these folks can help with bookkeeping, with website development and maintenance, which increasingly I think is going to be something that we see people wanting to do in this online space. Okay, with the last few minutes, I want to talk about some policies and programs and some resources, and then I'll open it up for questions for those participants who are here live for anything you all want to chat about. So I want to talk about some key programs in this space. The Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, or CFAP, round 2 is coming up. So the Biden administration is currently reviewing this program. So the February 26th deadline for signups for this has been eliminated. This is something that folks are still eligible for. Eligibility includes specialty crops and livestock and nursery crops and floriculture. So things that might be relevant to our direct marketers and local food producers. So I would encourage folks to take a look. I've linked here to the USDA CFAP information page where you can learn about eligibility. And I've linked to the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition CFAP 101 page, which I think has a really nice roundup of information about the CFAP program. So this is for producers who had their revenue income negatively impacted due to the pandemic. So I would encourage you to check this out and watch for updates about this as well. The Paycheck Protection Program. The Paycheck Protection Program is a program through the Small Business Administration to provide support and loans to small businesses. Agricultural producers are eligible for paycheck protection loans, and currently, very small businesses are eligible for this program. Right now, the current round of loans is actually limited to the smallest businesses. So only businesses with less than 20 employees or sole proprietorships are eligible right now. This open window is through March 9th. So this is another option that some folks in direct marketing and local food might not have explored as a support program if you've been struggling with income and with the ability to pay workers during this time. So I anticipate, based on kind of what I've heard about the Paycheck Protection Program under the Biden administration, that there will be additional changes to ensure that this program is serving our smallest businesses. So I think that this will be beneficial to our local and direct marketers who tend to be smaller enterprises. So there's a link here to the Paycheck Protection Program page on the Small Business Administration website. Also, there are a variety of farm loan programs. Many of you might be familiar with these, but I wanted to list them. There are operating and ownership loans and micro loans from the Farm Service Administration. The Farm Service Administration also offers a farm storage facility loan program. So this can help with increasing things like cold storage and getting loans for cold storage, which might be relevant to our local and direct marketers. Also, I wanted to highlight that there is money set aside specifically for loans for minority and women farmers and ranchers and beginning farmers and ranchers, and these include special down payment loan programs as well. And the USDA has a really nice farm loan discovery tool if you're looking to try to understand which loans you might be eligible for. In terms of grant funding, most folks are probably familiar with these grants if you've been in the local and direct marketing space for any amount of time. We have the value added producer grants, the farmers market and local food promotion programs, and the newer regional food system partnership grants. So the first one has applications due online April 29th. The other three, I would expect the request for applications to come out very soon. In 2020, they came out in March. So I would expect those to be out soon and to be due later this spring. Other risk management tools I want to just mention. One is whole farm revenue protection. So this is crop insurance for diversified farms. It gives you the opportunity to insure all crops together. I've put a link to the Risk Management Agency website talking about whole farm revenue protection. There are likely changes to this program coming in 2021. RMA had listening sessions in 2020 to understand the needs of farmers producing for local and direct markets around the country, virtual listening sessions in 2020. And I do expect once there's a little bit of time for the new kind of appointees at USDA under the Biden administration to get their footing, for us to be hearing some more about potential changes from RMA, so insurance programs specifically marketed or specifically tailored and designed for local and direct marketers. So this is a really exciting development in this space, and hopefully we'll have some new information about that in this year. Okay, finally, last two slides, I just want to highlight a few resources. A number of things that I talked about today came from the Local Food Systems Response to COVID-19 Resource Hub. This is a fabulous hub, a partnership of a number of universities, the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, and a number of national organizations and service providers in the local food space. Fabulous resource hub, lots of wonderful information, fact sheets, etc. I've also highlighted the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Farm to Table website, which has great resources, and some of the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service websites. So these are great national resources. Ohio specific resources, we have the Ohio Market Maker connecting buyers and sellers, the OSU South Center's direct marketing team, which is doing great things in support of direct marketers around the state. There's a new toolkit that's been put together by the folks at the Ohio State University South Centers and our animal sciences extension team. It's a meat processing business toolkit, kind of responding to some of the kind of challenges and questions raised in spring 2020 related to bottlenecks in meat processing. Of course, our wonderful partners or friends over at OFA have the Good Earth Guide. Also, OFA has some great COVID-19 resources. The Ohio Farmers Market Network, also a resource, and our Ohio Local Food Directories, another great resource I want to highlight. So there'll be links to all of these once these are posted online for you. And with that, I will wrap up. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you found this information helpful. Please feel free to follow up with me if I can help with anything else. And I do encourage you to take a look at the links on here for anything that's interesting to you and you want to dig into.
Great, thank you, Zoe. I'm looking, we don't have any questions in the chat or Q&A, but I'll give people a moment to come up with them if they have them. Last call for questions. You have Dr. Plakias right here in the flesh. Oh,
I see a question here. Great. So there's a question about profitability moving to online sales. That is a great question. I have not yet seen any studies that look at profitability of online sales. I think that we'll probably see some of those studies coming out in 2021 because this has been a shift all over the place. I have heard anecdotally of a variety, and I just seeing the point here, right, that you make, that you've heard anecdotally that these sales are supported by grants and donations. I've heard of a variety of options. So I know one of the key things that different kind of national service providers are trying to do right now is to just understand what is the landscape of these different online options and providing tools. This is actually one of the things that is on OFA's COVID-19 response website is, I think, links to some of these comparison charts of the various online tools. So we don't yet know the kind of profitability associated with that. Certainly, I think one of the challenges that we might see moving forward is people trying to operate in multiple channels. So operate in the online channel at the same time as the in-person channel. And I have not actually heard how folks are managing those separate channels. And that's something where hopefully we can provide some more updated information in the future. But I thank you for that question, and I will be on the lookout for those studies so we can share that information out with our folks in Ohio.
Great. The only other thing in the Q&A was asking about your slides, so I will post those once you provide them to me. Another question in the chat.
Yeah, so the question here is, what are you seeing in consumer response to online meal bundles versus grocery selections with more choice? This is another place where I haven't seen a lot of evidence at this point, but I think it's a good question. In general, there's kind of two different ways that as an economist, we would think about this. One is that overall, we tend to think more choice is better, because people are able to get exactly what they want. At the same time, right now, given what I was saying about kind of the challenges of shopping and the heuristics that people are using, my guess is that right now we would see more kind of interest in online meal bundles, right? People wanting to just kind of decrease the cognitive load of shopping, right? I think we've all been there recently. I think in the long term, as we kind of move out of this situation where people are constantly in kind of stress mode, we will see ultimately that the online grocery selections with more choice will be important, and people will, as they have more time, then want to be able to tailor things to their needs. Even within the CSA space, I think we've seen over time that one of the things that with some CSAs folks have been, we're concerned about is, oh, I see a new product. I don't know what this vegetable is. I don't know what this fruit is. I don't know how to cook it. I might end up wasting it. We have seen even with some of those CSA boxes over time, as that has become a more common model, that people have gravitated to options with choices where they can actually pick them online ahead of time. A great question, Alan. Thank you.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions, so I want to thank you, Zoe, for taking the time to share that. And as I said, and I've posted in the chat the links to access recordings and previous presentations as well. Thank you all for attending, and have a wonderful rest of your Friday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Zoe.
All right. Thank you, ladies. I'm going to sign off. Nice to see you.
Take care.
Okay.
Good weekend, guys.
You too. Bye.